Right guys, so we're going to do the how-to. We're going to do our diff swap now of this E46 330 standard 2.93 open diff, and we're going to put in our 3.91 custom built limited slip differential built by our friends Chris and Dina from Medioris. What we hadn't explained when giving a bit of background to this diff is this diff is a real piece of custom engineering that's gone in here. I think a bit of black magic, a bit of know-how, but it's basically the combination of a bunch of different genuine BMW OEM parts, carefully selected to get something that works. We're using the casing, or the outer casing is basically the standard E46 diff casing. The gear ratios I think are sourced from a silver bumper E30, and then I think the actual LS unit itself is E46 M3 origin. I think, as I say, it's a bit of proprietary know-how that goes into it, but not easy to get somebody to build you a diff. These are of the few guys that can actually build an E46 limited slip diff. The reason that we cannot simply swap out this diff for an E46 M3 diff is because everything is different. Side shafts are different, subframe is different, prop shaft is different. It's just a non-starter if that's all that you're after. So this is a tricky thing, and we're really happy and grateful to have our hands on that. So we're going to get the old diff out first, and basically we want to take you through precisely what it's going to take to get the job done. The diff itself is actually mounted just with 3 bolts. There's a great big bolt transverse over here, which is a 21mm bolt with 21mm nut on the end, and then there are 2 18mm bolts coming in from the front side of the car, running in through the carrier on either side. To get to those, we need to remove the aluminium CV protecting bracket, which requires 2 18mm nuts to be removed, one on this side and one on that side. And then there are 2 13mm bolts on either side, which also have to be removed. On this side over here, there's an additional heat shield covering those bolts, so that'll have to come off first. And that's got 2 10mm bolts in it. To actually get the diff out to help us with access over here, we are going to need to remove the anti-roll bar. And to do that is relatively straightforward. We've got a 13mm bolt on this side and 2 13mm bolts over here, where the anti-roll bar connects onto the aluminium swing arm. So that's the guts of it. Of course, once we have everything out of the way, and before we remove the 3 main bolts, we will disconnect the side shafts. So the side shafts are female Torx, which are called E's. And basically, it's an E12 on the 6 female Torx bolts, or it's a female socket and male Torx head, and similarly 6 on the prop shaft on this side over here. Right, so we'll take you through it step by step as we tackle it, but we're going to start by removing the anti-roll bar. Right guys, so we're going to get this anti-roll bar off now. As we said before, we've got the 2 brackets at the back over here, 13mm bolts and nut on either side, and then we're going to move on to the actual the drop link that's connected onto the swing arm. What I think works best here is just put a little ratchet on the back end, on the nut, back end of the car, 13mm spanner on the front, got enough space, a little bit of wiggle work in there, and get this baby out. Particularly if you've still got stock exhaust, you're going to battle because you're going to have a big silencer in this area here. So you may need to loosen your exhaust hangers and actually get things out the way. Luckily, we have very little in the way of exhaust silencer at the back here. Alright, so now we're going to remove the sway bar links from the aluminium control arm. Quite tricky. I've already removed this one over here because on the top side we have the bolt head, which is 17mm. So if you can't see it, you will go through all the tools in your toolbox until you realize it's actually 17 and not a 13, which is what one would expect given the fact you've got a 13 nut. And there we go. Pretty easy. I'm going to leave that bolt in there. I'll show you another one if you like. So this is the one that's come out. As you can see, a little bit odd. 17mm head and a 13mm nut. Right, so we've done the other side. Now it's time to pull the sway bar out. First, I'm just going to release these brackets over here by pulling them down. It works quite easily, don't really need a screwdriver, as I thought. So I'm just going to rotate them and lift them up and out away from the little bracket. That should come free. And then gently move them past. Again, we've got adjustable rear control arm links or adjusters. So with the standard ones, which are a little wider, you may have some difficulty wiggling this out posture, but nothing that a bit of brute force probably won't resolve. There we go. We'll just thread it out from behind the exhaust. So there you go. What a puny, miserable, skinny little piece of anti-roll bar this is. All right, so we're going to get this aluminium bracket off here, and as I say, we're not quite sure what it does, but we suspect it just really is to protect the CV joint. But first things first, we want to remove this little heat shield here. It's a 10mm bolt. We access that relatively easy on the inboard one. There's two of them. Number one is out. Number two back here. Luckily for us, kind of aligns with our exhaust holes. May or may not with your exhaust. But remember, this is an exhaust which we built ourselves from bits and pieces of recycled exhaust pipes. It's a bit of a Frankenstein thing. There's our little heat shield and our two M10 by 10 nuts, our bolts. All right, moving swiftly on then. We're going to tackle the little inboard 13mm bolts. These little guys out of here. Number one, two, and see if we can get these out of here. One, two. All right, excellent. So little full guys come out. It was interesting seeing that bracket drop there. So now we can see. Ready to go. Right, ready to unbolt it from the side. And next is my key. Alright, so two subframe bolts and make sure we go in the right direction. Alright, now we're going to hit this guy up here. There's a bit of a wiggle. I'm going to try and fit my socket in somewhere. There we go. Get it through and onto that nut. Have to pull our exhaust across a little bit. Got it. All right, there's our little aluminium cross member. All right, guys, so now we've got our protective shield gone, we've got the anti-roll bar gone, so now we want to remove our prop shaft as well as the two side shafts, and then we can actually undo the main diff bolts. Getting these bolts undone can be a bit of a battle, particularly on the side shaft ones, because getting a decent socket in there is quite tricky. So if you do have a 3/8 socket rather in an E12, that will obviously fit a lot more easily. Unfortunately here we only have a 1/2 inch socket, so it can be quite tricky. Here it's no problem, but on the other side it gets a little tight. And you need to rotate the prop shaft to get to all the different bolts as you go through. So we're going to hammer that now. The rattle gun is great because, generally speaking, because it uses impact, you don't need to have somebody holding the wheels from turning. If you use just a normal ratchet or a spanner of any description, you will need somebody to hold the wheel. Otherwise, it just wants to try and turn away from you. So let's hit the first one. So just a little rattle gun. Doesn't make a lot of torque, but should be good enough to get these out. There we go. Number one.
3 down, 3 to go. If the impact guns are just creative, you know, particularly in tight spaces where you end up not being able to throw a ratchet around. It just saves so much time.
That is them. So if we can come across here and they can just have a little look. This is a CV joint on the end of the prop, and it sits in the flange. It actually sits in a recess. It's a nice tight fit, but you will see that there are some nice little cutaways. That's effectively just, you get a big fat flat blade screwdriver in there, and we pry that out. I'm going to do that right now.
Alright, big fat blade screwdriver, and we're just going to pop it back, and we're going to spin around, move on to the other side, and do the same, and a couple of these movements, and it will pop it right out for us.
And there we are. All right, the prop is free. Okay, let's move on to the side shafts. This is quite tough. The angle doesn't help us here, so you get more access on the bolt heads when the angle of the side shaft is up relative to the diff. Unfortunately, the ones we can get to are a little bit non-ideal, but we get there nevertheless. A little bit tight, but you just press it in against the boot, should be okay.
Alright, first 2 nut bolts out, swing it around.
This guy's not playing with this little rattle gun. I'm going to get the big boy. And last one on the side. There we go. All right, other side's going to be a little bit tighter because we've got the exhaust in the way there, but the principle's the same, and we'll catch up with you when I got that out. All right, so now we're going to remove the 2 18mm bolts holding the front of the diff to the subframe, and the last step that we will do is we'll take the last 21mm bolt off and drop the diff out. But Nick has just picked up that our bush on the front left side here is absolutely torn. So we will not be putting the diff back in today, certainly, and we'll be obviously now needing to get this out, and we'll obviously do the pair at the same time. The rear one was actually done relatively recently, so we're comfortable with that, but I think we're going to have a look at whether or not we can get some poly bushes to put in here. But yeah, it's going to be a bunch of work anyway to get that out, so plenty to keep us busy. So let's go. Almost not with a ratchet, but just tight enough to be a bit lethargic with the fingers. This is where the rattle guns are so nice. Can't really get it in here very easily, so swing a wrench. It's also where I'm reminded how lucky we are to have the 2-post hoist, because doing this on your back underneath the car, slapping yourself in the face with a ratchet end, actually not such good fun. Alright, so all the bolts are out with the exception of the last bolt on the rear subframe bush. So we're going to get that baby off now. And there we go. Alright, so that's basically it. I'm just going to get Nick to help me support the diff now while we pull the bolt out, and then we'll just drop the diff straight out the back. No drama.